I always thought the stories about Walmart being a hub for strange occurrences were just urban legends, tales spun to entertain bored night shift workers or stir up online forums. But after my experience, I'll never set foot in one of those stores again. It all began one dreary Friday evening when I found myself driving through an unfamiliar town, rain pouring down in heavy sheets. The glowing blue Walmart sign stood out against the stormy night like a beacon, promising a brief refuge and the chance to grab a few essentials before continuing my journey. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a few scattered cars that looked abandoned in the relentless rain. As I pushed open the glass doors, a chill swept over me. Not the kind from air conditioning, but something deeper, colder. The greeter wasn't at their usual post, and the store felt oddly quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears and makes every sound feel amplified. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting uneven shadows that danced across the aisles. I shook off the unease and grabbed a cart, its wheels squealing eerily as I moved forward. The first sign that something was off came in the form of the displays. They were all wrong. Products I'd never seen before lined the shelves. Canned goods with labels in a language I couldn't recognize, toys that seemed oddly misshapen, and clothes that looked decades out of style. The further I ventured into the store, the stranger it became. The aisles seemed impossibly long, stretching into the horizon like an optical illusion, and no matter how far I walked, I couldn't seem to reach the end. My cart began to fill with items I didn't remember picking up. An old vase tape, a single shoe, a doll with eyes that seemed to follow me as I moved. I decided I'd seen enough and turned to head back to the front, but the layout had changed. The aisles now twisted and turned like a maze, the signs above them bearing nonsensical words and symbols. Panic began to creep in as I realized I was utterly alone. The intercom crackled to life, and a voice, low, guttural, and barely human, muttered something I couldn't understand. "Attention shoppers," it growled. "The store will be closing in 10 minutes. Please make your final selections." I abandoned my cart and started running, my shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. The lights flickered more violently now, casting the store in a strobe-like effect that made my surroundings even more disorienting. Shadows darted across the periphery of my vision, too fast and too large to be human. I turned a corner and nearly collided with a figure. A mannequin, or at least that's what I thought at first. It stood unervingly still, its plastic face frozen in a grotesque smile that stretched too wide, its eyes empty and yet somehow filled with malice. As I backed away, it turned its head toward me, the motion stiff and unnatural. I ran without looking back, my breath ragged and heart pounding in my chest. I found myself in the electronics section, though it looked nothing like it should have. The televisions displayed static, but images flickered within. Scenes of people I didn't recognize yet felt a sickening familiarity with. One screen showed me wandering the aisles, another displayed my childhood bedroom, and a third showed a dark, featureless void. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and more oppressive until I had to cover my ears. Suddenly, all the screens went dark, and the hum ceased, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Then, from behind me, came the sound of footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, echoing through the vast emptiness of the store. I turned, but no one was there. Only the long, empty aisle stretching into darkness. I began to yell for help, my voice cracking with desperation, but it felt as though the sound was swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they seemed to surround me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shadow slipping between the aisles, too large to be human. The air grew colder, and my breath formed in visible puffs. Then came the laughter, soft at first but rising to a chilling crescendo, a cacophony of voices overlapping, some high-pitched and childlike, others deep and guttural. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, trying to block out the noise, but it was inside me now, reverberating in my skull. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, everything stopped. The silence was so sudden it felt deafening. I looked up and found myself back at the entrance, the automatic doors sliding open to reveal the stormy night outside. I stumbled into the rain, gasping for air, and turned to look back. The store was gone. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with debris. My car was still there, the only sign that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. I didn't waste any time getting in and driving away, the sound of the rain pounding on the roof my only company. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that Walmart. I've tried to find the town again, retrace my steps, but it's as if it never existed. The experience haunts me, the memories of those endless aisles, the shadows, the mannequins that moved, all burned into my mind. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear the faint squeak of a cart wheel or the echo of laughter, and I'm reminded that some doors should never be opened, some places never entered. I don't know what that Walmart was or what it wanted, but I know I barely escaped, and I'm not sure everyone does. I always thought the tales about Walmart being a hub of strange, unexplainable events were just myths, passed around to entertain the bored or scare the gullible. But that all changed the night I stopped at one on the outskirts of a small, nameless town while driving through a heavy downpour. The glowing Walmart sign was the only beacon in the dark, rain-slicked landscape, promising a quick break and maybe a few necessities before I continued on my way. The parking lot was nearly empty, the rain hammering down so hard it drowned out everything else. As I stepped inside, the automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, and an unnatural chill enveloped me, though it wasn't the kind that came from air conditioning. The greeter wasn't there, and the store seemed oddly silent, save for the faint hum of flickering fluorescent lights. Pushing a squeaky-wheeled cart, I began walking through the eerily deserted aisles, my unease growing with every step. At first glance, it seemed like a normal Walmart, but subtle details started to stand out. Products with strange, unreadable labels, aisles that seemed impossibly long, and a sense of being watched that prickled at the back of my neck. When I turned a corner, I could have sworn I saw movement, a shadow slipping quickly out of sight, but when I looked, no one was there. I shook off the creeping dread, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the further I went, the more distorted everything seemed. The aisles twisted in ways that didn't make sense, their ends disappearing into dark voids, and the signs above them displayed gibberish symbols that shifted if I stared too long. I decided I'd had enough and tried to head back to the entrance, but every turn I took led me deeper into the labyrinth. The shelves were now filled with bizarre, unsettling items. Dolls with hollow eyes that seemed to follow me, canned goods with rotting contents visible through their transparent labels, and old VHS tapes labeled only with my name. My breath quickened as I realized I was completely and utterly alone, or so I thought. The intercom crackled suddenly, its distorted voice announcing, "Attention shoppers, the store will be closing in 10 minutes. Please make your final selections." The voice was deep and guttural, more growl than human, and it sent a chill down my spine. Panic set in, and I abandoned the cart, sprinting through the aisles, desperate to find an exit. The fluorescent lights began flickering more violently, casting strobe-like shadows that played tricks on my eyes. I turned a corner and stopped dead in my tracks. Standing in the middle of the aisle was a mannequin, or at least it looked like one at first. Its plastic face bore an exaggerated, grotesque smile that stretched unnaturally wide, and its head tilted slowly as if it was watching me. I backed away, but it took a step forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. I turned and ran, my pulse pounding in my ears, the sound of plastic feet tapping behind me growing louder with every step. I thought I'd escaped when I stumbled into the electronics section, but the televisions there weren't playing advertisements or static. Instead, they displayed horrifying, fragmented images. One screen showed me wandering the aisles in real time, another displayed scenes from my childhood home, and a third flickered with a dark, empty void that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and more oppressive until it felt like my skull would crack. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, everything went silent. The screens went dark, leaving me alone with my ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. I turned to leave, but the path was blocked by more mannequins, their twisted smiles and vacant eyes forming a wall of plastic horror. As I backed away, I felt something cold and hard grip my shoulder. I screamed and turned, but there was nothing there. I bolted, not caring where I went, as long as it was away from that nightmare. The aisles twisted and shifted, leading me in circles, the store itself seemingly alive and intent on keeping me trapped. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, their forms massive and formless, and the air grew colder with each passing second. I was no longer alone. Faint whispers echoed through the aisles, voices overlapping in a cacophony of unintelligible murmurs, punctuated by soft, childlike giggles and deep, guttural laughs. The lights above flickered and buzzed, plunging sections of the store into momentary darkness before sputtering back to life. My legs burned from running, but I couldn't stop, not with the shadows closing in around me. Then, I saw it, the entrance, glowing faintly like a beacon through the chaos. I sprinted toward it, dodging the mannequins that seemed to appear out of nowhere, their plastic hands reaching for me. Just as I reached the doors, they slid open, and I stumbled into the rain-soaked parking lot, gasping for air. I turned to look back, but the store was gone. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with debris, as if no Walmart had ever stood there. My car was still there, though, the only sign that what I'd experienced might have been real. I didn't waste any time getting in and driving away, the rain pounding against the windshield the only sound as I sped down the dark, empty road. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. I've tried searching for that town, that Walmart, but it's as if neither ever existed. I've read stories of strange occurrences at Walmarts across the country, but none come close to what I experienced. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the faint squeak of a cart wheel or the distorted laughter of that intercom voice, and I know deep down that some doors are meant to stay closed, and some places are better left undiscovered. It was past midnight when I found myself inside the Walmart, a place I usually avoided at this hour, but the desperation for something to eat outweighed my hesitation. The store was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the noise of the daytime rush, and the flickering lights above me only added to the unsettling atmosphere. I made my way past the rows of empty carts, the sound of my footsteps the only thing breaking the silence. The air felt colder as I moved deeper into the store, and for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The place seemed too quiet, too still. My mind raced as I pushed my cart past the aisles, the products stacked in perfect rows, all neatly organized. I couldn't help but notice the faint smell of something stale, something old, like a forgotten memory. I shrugged it off, but as I turned down aisle 13, a shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know why. It was just an aisle lined with cleaning supplies. Nothing special. But as I pushed the cart forward, I noticed something strange. At the far end of the aisle, the fluorescent light above flickered more erratically, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across the floor. I paused, my hand gripping the handle of the cart, and looked down the aisle. It was empty, but something felt wrong. I heard it then. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the same direction I had just walked. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen anyone else in the store when I entered. There were no other customers, no staff in sight. Yet, the footsteps echoed behind me, moving closer. I turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no one. Just the same rows of cleaning products, stacked neatly on the shelves. The silence returned, and I told myself I was just imagining things. But then the footsteps came again, closer this time, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. My pulse quickened as I looked down the aisle once more. Still no one. I took a few more steps, my breath shallow, but as I reached the end of the aisle, I heard something else. Whispers. Soft at first, barely audible, but growing louder, like a dozen voices speaking all at once, murmuring something I couldn't quite make out. I turned again, scanning the empty space around me, but there was nothing. The air felt thicker now, pressing against my chest as if the store itself was closing in on me. The whispering was now all around me, coming from every direction. "Leave," one voice hissed, followed by another. "Get out while you still can." Panic surged through me. I backed away toward the aisle entrance, my feet stumbling over the tiles as I tried to make sense of what was happening. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more urgent, like they were right behind me, breathing in my ear. "You shouldn't be here," another voice warned, its tone low and menacing. My heart raced, and I glanced over my shoulder, but once again, there was nothing. Just empty shelves and the eerie hum of the lights. The footsteps started again, closer this time, too close. I spun around, my mind a whirlwind of fear, but there was no one. I couldn't see anyone, but I could feel them. Whoever or whatever, they were right behind me, their presence so overwhelming it was as if the very air had changed. The store seemed to close in around me, the aisles stretching on forever, the lights flickering like they were about to go out. Couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, and my thoughts were spinning out of control. I needed to get out, but the whispers grew louder, their voices overlapping, a cacophony of voices, all speaking in unison. "It's too late for you." I turned toward the exit, my legs moving faster now, but as I reached the sliding doors, they didn't open. I pushed harder, panic clawing at me, but the doors remained shut, locked tight. The whispers were now screams, agonized and frantic, as if they were being torn from somewhere deep inside the store. The air grew colder, and I could feel something shift in the atmosphere. Something ancient, something angry. My heart was hammering in my chest as I turned to face the store again, my eyes darting over the aisles. That's when I saw it, movement in the corner of my eye, just at the edge of my vision. A figure hunched and distorted, standing in the shadows at the far end of the aisle. I couldn't make out its features, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold and unblinking. The whispers stopped. Silence fell over the store, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. My breath caught in my throat as I took a step backward, my back pressed against the glass doors. It was too much. I had to get out. I ran. My footsteps echoed down the aisles, my heart thundering in my chest as I desperately searched for another exit. The store seemed endless, the aisles twisting and turning in ways they shouldn't. Every step felt like I was moving further away from safety, deeper into whatever darkness had claimed the place. The figure was gone now, but I could feel its presence, lingering in the air, waiting. I don't know how much time passed before I stumbled back to the front of the store, my hands shaking as I grabbed the door handle once more. This time, the door opened. I burst outside, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until I was far away, the lights of Walmart a distant, fading glow behind me. But as I looked back, I could still hear it, faint whispers carried by the wind, echoing in my mind. "You shouldn't have come. You'll never leave." And I knew, deep down, that the store wasn't finished with me yet. I had never planned on going to Walmart that night, but something pulled me there, a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I walked into the store, my footsteps echoing in the empty aisles. The place was deserted, save for a few employees stocking shelves and a couple of tired souls wandering through the fluorescent-lit labyrinth. I grabbed a cart and headed toward the back, glancing down each aisle as I passed, the flickering lights above casting long shadows along the shelves. I could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights, the sound of carts being pushed, the distant rattle of someone else's cart. Felt like any other night, quiet, routine, unremarkable. But then, somewhere in the depths of the store, I heard it. A soft scuff of footsteps, too light to be anyone walking normally, too deliberate to be an accident. I stopped and glanced around, half expecting someone to be close by, but the aisle was empty. The air felt thick, the kind of quiet that presses down on you, like something is about to happen but you're too slow to notice it. I shook it off, thinking it was just the store settling, some odd noise bouncing through the aisles. I picked up a few items, moving deeper into the store. The footsteps followed me, just behind me, always a step too far away to see anyone, but close enough to make my skin prickle. Every time I turned a corner or glanced behind me, there was no one, nothing, but I could hear it, the distinct sound of someone trailing behind. My heartbeat quickened, Maybe it was just a fellow shopper, I told myself. Maybe someone was on a similar errand, wandering through the store at this hour. I turned down an aisle, my eyes scanning the shelves, trying to distract myself from the growing unease in my chest. And then, out of nowhere, the air grew colder. A sharp chill ran through my body, and I immediately felt the shift, the feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced over my shoulder again, but once more, no one. Just the empty aisles, the flickering lights, the hum of the store. I kept walking. My steps hurried now, as if trying to outrun the creeping sensation that had settled in my bones. That's when I noticed the whispers. At first, I thought it was just the wind or the sound of the air conditioning. But no, it was a voice too soft to make out, too low to identify. It was coming from somewhere nearby. I froze. I didn't dare move for a few moments, standing stock still, my breath catching in my throat. The voice was too close. The footsteps were too close. I felt a surge of panic rise in my chest. Someone was following me, no doubt about it. But who and why? I hurried down another aisle, this time almost running. The store seemed endless, the aisles stretching on forever, as if I was being led deeper into its bowels. My heart was pounding in my ears now, the sound of my feet against the floor drowned out by the frantic thumping in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the oppressive presence hovering just beyond my reach. Every turn I took, every glance behind me, there was no one there, yet the footsteps, the whispers, they never stopped. I reached the electronics section, hoping to lose myself in the endless rows of TVs and gadgets. I needed a moment to breathe, to calm down. But as I picked up a random box from a shelf, I heard it again, the soft scuff of footsteps. I spun around, my heart in my throat, and for the briefest moment, I saw it. A shadow, darker than the rest, just at the end of the aisle, too far to make out anything more than a vague shape. And then it was gone, slipping into the darkness between the shelves, like it was never there to begin with. I took a step forward, my mind racing, but I didn't feel alone anymore. That chill, that feeling of something lurking in the dark, had returned, stronger than ever. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as though something was holding me in place. I glanced at the exit. It was so close, but every time I took a step toward it, the sound of footsteps would follow me, speeding up, getting louder. My breath hitched. No matter how fast I moved, I couldn't outrun it. It was as if the store itself was closing in around me, the walls stretching inward, the aisles twisting unnaturally. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Then the whispers returned, clearer this time, almost like someone was breathing down my neck, just inches away. "You can't leave," the voice said, its tone low, gravelly, sending a shiver down my spine. My blood ran cold. "You're mine." I whipped around, the aisle behind me empty, as it had been all along. I stumbled back, but my feet were unsteady, my body trembling uncontrollably. Couldn't breathe. I could feel it. It was there, just behind me, but I couldn't see it, couldn't touch it. It was in the air, in the walls, in the floors. The store had swallowed me whole, and now I was its prisoner. I ran again, desperate, weaving through aisles, my mind fogged with fear. I had to get out. I had to escape. But the store wasn't letting me go. It was dragging me deeper into its bowels, its heart, where I could hear nothing but the sound of footsteps and whispers and the cold breath of something just behind me. I didn't know how long I'd been running, but eventually, I reached the front of the store again. The automatic doors were still open, but they didn't work. I tried to push them, slam them, anything to make them open, but nothing happened. The store had sealed itself off, trapping me inside. I could hear it now, the sound of it, just behind me, the whispers growing louder and louder, the footsteps so close I could feel them on my skin. I didn't dare look behind me again. Couldn't. And then, just as I was about to lose all hope, the lights flickered once more. And in that brief moment, when the store plunged into darkness, I felt something cold touch the back of my neck. A breath, a hand. I don't know what it was, but when the lights came back on, I was standing in the middle of the aisle, alone. The store was still, quiet once more, the hum of the lights the only sound. I don't know how I left or how I made it out, but I've never been back since. Walmart isn't the same to me anymore. It's not just a store. It's a place where something waits. Something that wants you, something that will follow you home. And if you ever hear those footsteps behind you, just know they're not your own. It was past midnight when I walked into the Walmart, the only store open at this hour in town. The automatic doors slid open with a soft swoosh, and the sterile, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sharp shadows across the empty parking lot. I was tired, needing to grab a few things to get through the next couple of days. Nothing fancy, just some groceries, maybe a new pair of socks. I never thought much about late-night shopping. Who would? It was quiet, the aisles were empty, and there was no rush. I grabbed a cart and pushed it aimlessly down the aisles. The faint hum of the air conditioning and the buzz of the lights the only sounds breaking the silence. I had just turned into the snack aisle when I heard it. A low sound, almost like a soft, strained breath. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't normal either. At first, I assumed it was just someone else in the store, another late-night shopper. But when I glanced around, I saw no one. The aisle stretched out in both directions, empty except for the towering shelves of chips and candy. I dismissed it, telling myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. I grabbed a bag of chips, but as I reached for the shelf, the air seemed to grow colder, and the low sound came again. This time clearer, like someone was standing right behind me, breathing heavily, but when I turned, there was nothing. No one. Just the empty aisle and the quiet hum of the store. My heart started to race a little. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I should leave. But I didn't. I moved deeper into the store, my feet moving faster now, as if trying to outrun the growing unease crawling up my spine. The aisles started to blur together, the familiar sight of rows of products starting to seem unnatural, almost like they were shifting, moving, becoming something else. It was like the store had grown larger somehow, stretching out, the aisles extending farther than they should. I glanced over my shoulder again, half expecting someone to be there, but there was nothing. No one. I was alone, or so I thought. That's when I heard it again. A whisper, soft, like a distant murmur, but so clear I could almost make out the words. It seemed to come from all directions, swirling around me, and I froze. My heart skipped a beat. "Help me?" the voice whispered, barely audible but unmistakable. I spun around, my eyes darting down the aisles, but there was no one there, just empty shelves, abandoned aisles. The store was as empty as it had been when I first walked in. But the voice didn't stop. It grew louder, more urgent, more desperate. "Help me. I need you." It wasn't coming from one direction anymore. It was everywhere. Around me, above me, below me. The voice was echoing in my head, growing louder, filling my mind with dread. My legs were shaking now, my palms sweating. I wasn't alone anymore, but there was no one in sight. Felt like something was watching me, listening to me. I could almost feel its presence, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to make a move. I wanted to leave. I wanted to turn and run, but something was holding me there, keeping me rooted to the spot. The air was thick with tension. The voice came again, clearer this time. "You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't be here." It wasn't a human voice. It was deeper, guttural, like it was being spoken from the very walls around me. It felt wrong, like I was hearing something I wasn't supposed to hear. The coldness in the air intensified, seeping into my bones. I tried to move, to take a step, but my legs wouldn't obey. My feet were frozen to the floor, trapped in place by the unrelenting pull of the voice. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to block out the whispers, the oppressive atmosphere surrounding me. But when I opened them, everything was different. The aisles were darker, the shelves taller. The walls of the store seemed to stretch and curve in unnatural ways, like I was in a maze that hadn't been there before. The lights flickered above me, casting shadows that twisted and distorted as if they had a life of their own. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a growl, deep and resonant. "You can't leave. You never leave." Panic surged through me, and I tried to turn around to find an exit, but the store seemed endless now. The aisles stretched out in every direction, each one darker, more twisted than the last. The shelves were no longer lined with ordinary products. They were filled with strange, unrecognizable items, things that shouldn't exist. Jagged, malformed objects, flickering lights, twisted shapes. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest, but the store wasn't letting me go. It was pulling me in, trapping me inside its labyrinth of dark aisles. The voice was all around me now, a constant murmur, the air thick with its presence. I could feel it pressing down on me, suffocating me. My breathing became ragged, my thoughts scattered, and I stumbled forward, trying to find any escape, any way out. But no matter how fast I moved, the aisles kept shifting, changing, becoming more and more disorienting. And then, as if from nowhere, a figure appeared in front of me. Just a shadow at first, but it grew clearer the closer I got. It was a man, but not a man. His face was pale, hollow, and his eyes, oh God, his eyes. They were black, empty voids that seemed to consume everything around them. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me with those lifeless eyes, and I felt the air freeze around me. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. It was as if I was frozen in time, held captive by the darkness that surrounded me. The voice came again, this time louder, clearer, 100 voices overlapping, chanting in unison. "You're ours now, forever." The man, or whatever he was, took a slow step toward me, and I felt my pulse race in my ears. He reached out a hand, his fingers twisted and elongated, and I could feel the coldness radiating from him, like death itself was reaching for me. My breath hitched in my throat, and I closed my eyes, praying for it to stop. But when I opened them again, everything had changed. The aisles were gone. The shelves were gone. The store was gone. I was standing in a dark, empty void, alone with the whispers, alone with the darkness. I could still hear the voice, but now it was in my head, inside my mind. "You're not leaving. Not now. Not ever." And in that moment, I realized with sickening clarity that the store had never been empty. I wasn't just in Walmart. I was in something much darker, something older. And it had been waiting for me, waiting for all of us. I had no idea what I was walking into that night when I pulled into the Walmart parking lot, the harsh fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow on the wet pavement. The rain had been coming down in torrents for hours, and the world outside was so dark and thick with fog that it felt like I had stepped into a different world. I thought I'd just run in, grab some snacks, maybe a drink, and get back to my car as quickly as possible. But something about that Walmart felt different the moment I stepped inside. It was too quiet, unnervingly so. The usual bustle of late-night shoppers was absent, replaced by a hollow silence that seemed to stretch out around me. I brushed it off, chalking it up to the late hour, and grabbed a cart, its wheels squeaking as I pushed it through the aisles. The store felt larger than usual, the aisles stretching far into the distance, bending at odd angles that didn't quite make sense. The shelves were lined with ordinary products, groceries, cleaning supplies, clothes, but something was off. The air felt dense, almost thick, and it was getting harder to breathe. My eyes kept darting to the corners of the aisles, and every time I turned a corner, I could feel it, the sensation that someone or something was watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. At first, I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, but the longer I stayed in the store, the stronger the feeling became. I could hear faint whispers, too soft to make out, but enough to send chills down my spine. I stopped in front of the snack aisle, pretending to look at the chips, but my gaze kept shifting. It felt like someone was standing just behind me, close enough to brush against my skin. Yet when I turned, no one was there. The whispers grew louder, and a shiver ran up my spine as the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I decided to move on, trying to shake the unsettling sensation, but it didn't help. As I walked past the next aisle, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow, just a blur, slipping behind the towering shelves. My breath caught in my throat, and I quickened my pace, heading deeper into the store, hoping to lose whatever it was that was following me. But it was there, always just a few steps behind. I could hear the soft shuffle of footsteps, too light to be a person, and then the whispers again, this time clearer, like they were coming from right next to me. "You can't escape." The words were so faint, I wasn't sure if I had heard them or if it was just my mind. I turned a corner, and there it was, an old, dusty section of the store I didn't remember seeing before. The shelves were stacked with strange, old books and jars of unknown substances, their labels covered in strange symbols I couldn't recognize. I had no desire to go near it, but something about the place drew me in. As I moved closer, the whispers intensified, louder now, more urgent. "You can't leave. You'll never leave." My heart was pounding now, and every instinct screamed at me to turn around and leave. But when I tried, I found my legs frozen in place, my body unwilling to obey. It felt like something was holding me there, something unseen, something powerful. The lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the floor, and that's when I noticed it. Footprints. Small, faint, but unmistakable. They were wet, as though someone had walked through a puddle, and they led directly to the aisle I had just been standing in. I glanced up, my eyes searching for the source of the footprints, but there was no one there. Then I heard it again, that soft shuffle of footsteps behind me, closer this time, followed by a breath, warm against my ear. I spun around, but no one was there. My heart was racing now, and panic was creeping in. I started walking faster, then broke into a jog, my footsteps echoing in the empty aisles. But no matter how fast I moved, those footsteps were always behind me, just out of sync with my own, like they were mimicking my every move. The whispers became louder, sharper, and now I could make out the words, "Stay with me, forever." I sprinted, weaving through the aisles, but every time I glanced behind me, there was no one there. I didn't know how long I'd been running, but by the time I reached the back of the store, I realized I was completely lost. The aisles had twisted and turned, and I couldn't remember how I'd gotten here. The floor beneath me felt sticky, as if something had been spilled and never cleaned up, but I didn't have time to investigate. I needed to get out. The door was in sight, but as I approached, it wouldn't open. I slammed my hand against the automatic doors, but they remained closed, like they were locked from the inside. Panic surged through me as I turned to find another way out, but that's when I saw it, the reflection. It wasn't in the glass door, but in the blackened windows near the front of the store, visible only in the dim light. It was a shape, a dark, twisted silhouette that seemed to stretch unnaturally, its arms too long, its face too featureless. I could feel it, closing in, moving toward me with the quiet persistence of something that had all the time in the world. "Stay with me," it whispered, the voice now louder, colder, more desperate. My breath caught in my throat as I turned and ran back into the depths of the store, the whispers turning into an incessant chant. "Stay with me, stay with me." It was the only thing I could hear now, the only thing I could feel as the walls seemed to close in around me, the aisles stretching out into an endless maze, and the shelves bending in impossible angles. I stumbled, my mind unraveling as the shadows closed in. I don't know how long I ran, but when I finally found the door again, it opened. I don't know why or how. I don't know if it was me or if something else was responsible, but I bolted outside, into the cold night air, my lungs burning from the exertion. The store behind me was gone, just an empty parking lot bathed in the dull glow of the streetlights. The rain had stopped, and the night was still. But as I looked back, I knew I would never forget what I had heard. The whispers, the footsteps, and the cold, knowing presence that had followed me through every aisle. I don't know what it was, but I know one thing for sure. It wasn't human. And the next time I go to a Walmart, I'll never be alone again. I never thought a simple trip to Walmart at midnight would end up changing my life forever. But it did. It started out like any other late-night errand. I needed some last-minute supplies for a project and had planned to just grab a few things and head home. But the moment I walked through those automatic doors, something felt off. It was as if the air itself was heavier, thicker, like the store was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I shook it off, thinking maybe I was just tired from the long day. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, flickering every now and then, casting eerie shadows along the aisles. I picked up a shopping cart, its wheels squeaking as I pushed it forward, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the stillness of the store. The first few minutes were normal. I grabbed a couple of items from the shelves and made my way toward the back of the store. But as I walked, I noticed something strange. I wasn't alone. It wasn't like there were other shoppers. No, it was different. It felt like someone was following me, though every time I turned around, no one was there. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. Maybe it was the empty store making me paranoid, but the feeling kept growing stronger with each passing minute. The aisles seemed longer, more winding, and the store seemed to stretch on endlessly. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind me, but whenever I turned, I saw nothing, no one in sight. I tried to ignore it, focusing on what I came for, but the sound of those footsteps was constant, always just a little behind me. It was like they were mimicking my movements. I picked up the pace, hoping to shake whatever it was that was following me, but the footsteps quickened too, matching my every step. I reached the aisle where I needed to go, and as I turned down it, I felt a cold gust of air wash over me, and my skin prickled with goosebumps. It wasn't from the air conditioning. It was something else. I turned to look behind me, but the aisle was empty. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, that someone was watching me. I decided to leave, heading back toward the front of the store, but that's when it happened. The overhead lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving me in darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight. The darkness was oppressive, suffocating. As I lit the screen, the pale light cut through the blackness, casting strange, twisted shadows on the shelves around me. The footsteps were louder now, closer, and I could hear a soft breathing sound, shallow and raspy, almost like someone was right behind me, too close for comfort. I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest, but again, no one was there. That's when I heard it. A whisper, so faint, so low, that it almost seemed to come from the air itself. "You're not alone." The word sent a shiver through me, and for the first time, I felt true fear. I wasn't alone. The whisper came again, this time more urgent. "I see you." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I slowly turned around, the flashlight shaking in my hand as I swept it across the aisles. Nothing. Yet the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I took a few tentative steps forward, but my mind was racing, and my heart was hammering in my chest. What was going on? Why couldn't I see who was following me? I reached the electronics aisle, and just as I glanced over my shoulder, I saw something. A flicker, a shadow, a shape darting between the shelves. My blood ran cold. It was too quick for me to get a good look, but it was there, just out of reach of the flashlight's beam. I turned and bolted, racing through the aisles, my breath ragged, the footsteps following me, relentless. I had to get out. I had to get to the exit. As I ran, I could hear the whispers again, louder this time, echoing in the empty store. "You can't escape." I turned the corner to the front of the store, but when I reached the automatic doors, they didn't open. I slammed my hand against them, but nothing happened. I pounded on the glass, desperate, but the doors remained shut, as though they were locked. I tried to turn back, but the store seemed to stretch on, the aisles twisting and changing, leading me farther into the maze of shelves. It felt like I was running in circles, and no matter how fast I moved, I couldn't find my way out. Then, just as I started to lose hope, I heard it again. The whisper, "You should have stayed." The voice was closer now, just behind me, and I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was nothing there. My mind was racing, but I couldn't think straight. My legs were giving out, and panic was beginning to consume me. The whispers came again, louder, like they were all around me now, coming from every direction. "You can't leave. You're mine." I stumbled, falling to the ground, and in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I was trapped. Trapped in the store, in the dark, with whatever this was that was following me. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in complete darkness. I could still hear the whispers, though, like they were coming from inside my own head. The store had become a labyrinth, and the whispers were my only company, growing louder until they drowned out everything else. I couldn't escape. I knew then that I wasn't just being followed. I wasn't just being watched. I had become part of the store, part of the darkness that lived within the aisles. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time seemed to lose all meaning. I can't remember how I finally got out, if I ever did. But every time I go into that Walmart now, I feel it again. The cold presence, the whispers in the aisles, and the feeling that I'm being watched. Maybe it's my imagination. Maybe it's something else. But I know one thing for sure. I'll never step foot in that store again at night, because there's something there, and it's waiting for the next shopper to wander in, lost, alone, and ready to become part of the store's twisted reality. Started like any ordinary night. I had to run a quick errand, just pick up a few things at Walmart. Nothing unusual. The store was quiet, and I had expected that. It was 1 a.m., and the only other people wandering through the aisles were tired night shift workers and the occasional insomniac shopper. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, casting long, flickering shadows on the linoleum floors. I grabbed a cart and meandered through the aisles, my mind wandering as I searched for cereal and coffee, my usual late-night go-tos. But then, I noticed something strange. I couldn't explain why, but I felt watched. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking it was just my imagination. Maybe I was just tired. But as I walked through the store, I couldn't shake the feeling. Every aisle I turned down, every corner I rounded, it felt like someone was following me. Not just walking behind me, but moving with intent, as if they were trailing me from aisle to aisle, watching my every move. I turned a corner into aisle 17, the one with the cleaning supplies, and there it was again. That sensation, the feeling that I wasn't alone. I stopped dead in my tracks and looked down the aisle. The aisle was empty, of course, but I could swear I heard something. A shuffle, barely noticeable but enough to make my heart race. I took a slow step forward, my eyes scanning the shelves, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. But nothing. The aisle was as empty as it had been moments before. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. My skin prickled with unease, and my palms began to sweat. I grabbed a bottle of bleach from the shelf, but before I could even look at it properly, I heard it again. A faint sound, almost like breathing. I looked up and froze. At the far end of the aisle, between the shelves, I could just make out something. Two eyes. They were staring at me, unblinking, hidden in the darkness between the rows of products. They weren't just reflecting light. They were looking at me, watching me. The eyes were dark, hollow, and unsettling. I could feel the coldness emanating from them, even though I knew there was no one there. I blinked and they were gone. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just the lighting, a trick of my tired eyes. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it intensified. I quickly finished my business in the aisle, grabbing what I needed, and turned to leave, but the feeling of being watched never left. It was worse now, suffocating, the sensation that something was right behind me, close enough to touch. I quickened my pace, moving faster, my heart hammering in my chest. But the footsteps, soft, slow, followed me. It was subtle but unmistakable. Someone was walking behind me, matching my every step. I glanced back, expecting to see someone, but the aisle was empty. No one was there, but the sound, the presence, it was there. As I walked faster, I began to notice that the aisles felt off, like they were stretching farther than they should have, the walls looming taller and darker. I tried to reach the exit, but each aisle felt longer, more disorienting. And still, the footsteps followed me. No matter how fast I moved, they were always there. Soft, deliberate, unnervingly close. I stopped and looked around, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just someone following me. It was as if the store itself was alive, bending and shifting, drawing me in. The lights above me flickered again, casting eerie shadows across the aisles, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something move. A blur, a figure, just on the edge of my vision. I spun around, heart in my throat, but again, nothing. Just the empty aisles, the quiet hum of the store. I was losing my mind. There was no one there. I started walking again. Faster now, my mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. But the air felt wrong, thick, like I was wading through it. Every step felt heavier, as if the store was pressing down on me. I could hear the footsteps still, now louder, more urgent. And then, I heard a voice, so soft it was barely audible, whispering from just behind me. "Turn around." It sent a cold shiver down my spine. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to know. But the voice came again, more insistent, closer. "Turn around. Look at me." I was frozen, my heart racing in my chest. My legs wouldn't move. The voice wasn't human. It was hollow, like something lost in the void, and I knew, deep down, that whatever it wasn't supposed to be there. The footsteps stopped. I could feel the air shift, and I just knew, that something was standing behind me. I had to look. I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, hesitantly, I turned around, my breath shallow, my pulse thumping in my ears. And there, just a few feet away, was a face. No body, no figure, just a face. It was pale, almost translucent, its features stretched and distorted, like it had been sketched by a mad artist. The eyes were the worst part. Black, deep, and hollow, staring at me as if they could pierce my soul. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed by terror, unable to break free from its gaze. It reached out, or rather, I thought it did. Its hand extended toward me, but it wasn't a hand. It was more like a massive shadow, an inky blackness that seeped through the air. The store around me seemed to disappear, the shelves warping and melting away. It felt like the walls were closing in, like the very building itself was swallowing me whole. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, surrounding me, pressing in on all sides. "You're not alone," the voice said. "You're never alone here." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The shadows were all around me, suffocating me, pulling me into the darkness. I could still hear the whispers, the cold, empty voice. "You're ours now." And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back at the front of the store, standing in the checkout line, my cart still filled with the items I had picked up earlier. The lights were normal again, the aisles empty, just the way they should have been. But I knew something was wrong. I had been in the store for what felt like hours, maybe longer. The air was different now, still thick, as if something had shifted. Something was watching me, and as I turned to leave, I couldn't help but feel it again. The footsteps, the whispering voice, the feeling that something was waiting for me, just behind me. Walmart wasn't the same anymore. The store was alive, and it knew my name.